listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. Man, we are here once again today. Man, we have another awesome show lined up for y'all today. We're going to talk to Shana Francesca, and we're going to just dive into a pretty cool topic, choosing joy, living an authentic life. And we're going to learn all about what she does and also about her personal story, because she's a speaker, she's a writer, and she is also an entrepreneur, and she's been interviewed on a ton of podcasts worldwide. So, man, we have a true honor having Shana on the show. How you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Man, appreciate your time. So kind of spill the beans for our audience. Tell us a little bit about what you do today and what inspired you to take your path.
Yeah. So my work centers around intentional living and leadership. And what inspired me to take this path is I grew up in an abusive household. I now understand that I was in a religiously abusive environment as well. So we went to church, but it was more of a cult than a church. And so there was no aspect of my life in which I felt seen and heard and understood and valued, in which I felt like I could identify who I was and allow that to take up space. And as I grew up, I started to realize that although I felt that overwhelmingly in my own life, there was an aspect of that in so many people's lives, like more than not, in which in some way we felt in our lives, our humanity taken from us, our creativity or who we are diminished, or, our humanity taken away by other people's fear. And so I started kind of experimenting with my own environment as a kid, growing up in that abusive environment. I started writing quotes on index cards and pasting them all up over my bedroom wall. I would go when your parents back in the day would have you and go to the doctor with them, there was magazines in the waiting room, and I would slowly tear out the pages so that they didn't know what I was doing, because you would get in trouble. I would steal those pages and I would put them up on my bedroom walls. They were images of maybe some beautiful home or of a person really well dressed, some aspect of how I wanted myself to be able to be represented in the world. And I used to take the JCPenney catalog and circle all the things that I thought could be part of this life I was creating for myself. And so I very much lived inside of my imagination, because it was the only place where I felt fully seen, heard, and understood. And as I got older, I started to realize that being an interior designer was a thing. And having established this deep connection between my physical environment and my own mental health was deeply important. And so I went to school, became an interior designer, but there was always this part of my work, the pervasive part of my work, that was sitting down and establishing with clients, who are you? Who do you wish you could be in the world? How do you wish you were seen and understood? How do you wish you were supported in your physical environment, in your life? How do you wish you could show up? In a world with no rules, with no budget, what would we create? What would you want to create? And creating their home environment or their business or whatever I was designing for them, creating from that place. And it was such an important exercise that it kind of became the whole thing. Right? It became the very center of my work. It became my work. And about 5 years ago now, I started doing group coaching around the concept of showing up for ourselves, living in community with one another, taking courageous acts, being curious, being respectful. What does it look like to listen in and lean into one another, and truly try to understand the world from each other's lived experiences? And at that point, I made the decision to go ahead and begin to transition the business to what I now call life design, which is, again, my work focuses on intentional living and leadership. And that's really kind of the definition of what I call life design.
And people can check out all your work that you do, because, like I said, you're a keynote speaker. You just said life designer and writer, but you have a website that people can go visit and learn also more about you. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So on my website, there's information about me as a speaker. I have the links to so many of the podcasts that I've been on. I usually update it once a month. So that their most current episodes are up there. There's information, there's some free information for people about what is life design, what are little steps that people can take for it to start impacting that intentionality, to start impacting their lives and make it a practice. There's information about upcoming workshops. You can also find my contact information so that you could reach out to me to speak at an event that you're hosting, or perhaps come into your business and do one-on-one or group coaching.
And people can go to that website, Concinnate.world / Shana Francesca. And today's topic is all about just how, when it comes to it, we know you're a life designer, but choosing joy and choosing to live an authentic life, that's a process in itself. For you, how were you aware that you were living an authentic life? And what I mean by that is prior to your professional field.
Yeah. So I think living an authentic life in this world, specifically in America, is a practice, because so many aspects of it ask us to forfeit our humanity in order to conform, in order to condense ourselves into binaries. And I think I've sat down in there was a podcast I was on a couple of months ago, and we were talking about what I do. And one of the hosts is a finance guy. He's like, let's distill it into a formula, what you do. And the formula we came up with at the time, which has changed a little bit, was to be curious, be respectful, and to be open. And that is what leads us to living an intentional life, right? I think those are the main aspects of my work. And I think when we tap into curiosity, when we admit to ourselves and allow ourselves to sit with, I don't know everything, right? And there's much for me to learn in this world. We start tapping into a part of ourselves that lets ourselves be, right? We don't have to be the know-it-all. We don't have to know everything. We don't have to know more than the person next to us. That we are actually meant to live in community together, right? When we live in community together with one another, there is nothing to be self-conscious about. There's nothing to apologize for, because we don't have to show up as everything, right, in order to succeed.
Yeah.
And I think when we get to that place, when you get to the place where you can just be, where if you see a puddle after a beautiful rainstorm, you can jump in it if you want to. And that's not a metaphor, that's reality, right? Right? Where we can just be like, you know what? I want to go skipping in that field right now, right? Or I want to just sing while I take a walk today, or I want to dance while I'm in public, like whatever. It doesn't have to be it's not performative either, right? It comes from inside of ourselves. We're listening to a song or we're doing something. We're like, man, I just want to do this thing right now. And we just do it, right? Like we embrace the joy in the moment. We get curious about what's possible when we lean into who we are, and we do the things that bring us joy, despite the fact that people will judge us, because no matter what you do, people will judge you, right? And the more we give ourselves permission to show up as fully ourselves, right? And it doesn't have to be in those specific ways, right? But like the more that we lean into curiosity, the more we lean into play, the more we get connected to those things, the more intentional we become. And the more joy comes with that, right? Like just being ourselves, and intention comes from us saying, okay, this is what I want from this moment. And now let me align my action with that intention. And that alignment of that action really helps to give us focus and allows us to release that which is no longer serving us, or maybe never did, right? Including other people's expectations.
Yeah, it goes back to, the key word, choose. You get to choose, whatever is your favorite flavor, ice cream, food, right, restaurant, favorite basketball team, football team, sport, people, clothes. I mean, the list goes long. It could be a car, it could be a bike, it could be anything. I mean, it could be the watch that you have on. I mean, the stores you choose to go and shop, it never ends. You always have a choice.
Yeah, exactly. We always have a choice. Not everybody has the same access to the same variety of choices, right? I
True.
do acknowledge that there are systems of oppression that we all live inside of. And some people experience more oppression than others based on the intersection of multiple marginalized communities. But even inside of that, we do have choices. But the way to help to break down those systems of oppression is to live in community with one another. And to be able to do that, we have to be authentically connected to ourselves and be living intentionally, understanding that we as human beings are part of an ecosystem. This earth, our bodies, everything around us is part of an ecosystem. And we're currently disrupting it, right? With our behaviors, with our excessive consumption. And the more intentional we get, the more we realize we don't have to consume to prove our value.
It's kind of
right?
like what you want versus what you really need. How do you kind of weigh those balances for your personal life?
And it's okay to want, and it's okay to fulfill those wants, but is our want actually connected to our internal selves, or is it connected to marketing and programming, right? So much of marketing tells us that we have to consume to be able to fit in, to be accepted, to be valued within our society. So is our consumption tied to our wanting to be valued by other people or valuing ourselves? Right. And yes, we need each other. Right. So there's so much nuance in this conversation, right? Being intentional is not one thing or another. It is literally all the things together, but it's not about doing more. It's about being more intentional with what we're already doing. Right.
Yeah. And with you being a life designer, for our listeners, someone who's interested in kind of understanding the process of designing their own life, what's some of the common obstacles you think people face during the process?
I think it can be really hard because our world is like succeed or it's failure, right? And we've been taught this very binary understanding of the world around us. And it can be really hard when everything is demanding our attention all the time to really dive into how do I create an intentional practice? And so I try to make it as simple as possible. So we start with something that feels arbitrary, but stay with me here, right? We encounter or put on our body probably things that contain scent, like 12 different scents at any given moment in time, right? We have shampoo and conditioner. We have body wash. We have the laundry detergent and our dryer sheets. We have, we have all of these different things that we put on our body, our deodorant, right? Every single day, our face lotion that all have scents associated with them. But how often do we think about how those scents actually work together? We have to buy all of those things, right? But if we took a second to say, oh, you know what? I'm going to this month, I want lavender to be the theme of what I buy everything to be, or I want, this kind of woody, more outdoorsy smell, or something that's citrus. And that's really, if we thought about that and said, okay, I'm going to make everything kind of coordinate that way so that my experience with my own body now becomes something intentional, right? By doing so, by just taking that step to think about how those things coordinate, that split second decision, right? It starts to show our brain that we care, right, about that level of intention. And it starts to show us the other ways in our life in which we can be more intentional. We have to make those little micro practices, right? And it's not like a crazy thing. The other benefit is that scent is our strongest connection to memory and emotion. Now, people are like, oh, really? Okay, so demonstration. Think about your favorite family member, grandmother, grandfather, aunt, mother, whoever it is. Ultimately, what typically happens for us is that when we think about that person, we immediately smile. And then we usually think about something scent associated, the way that they smell when we hug them, or the way the thing that they cook that's our favorite, their signature dish smells when we walk into their house, right? We think about those things and it makes us smile. That's the way our association works with scent and memory. We think of something, we might think of a scent, it triggers a specific emotion. We can use that for our own benefit, right? So if lavender is something we specifically already associate with relaxation, and this is going to be a particularly stressful month, By surrounding ourselves with lavender, we can start to reassure our brain that we're okay and put ourselves in a state of relaxation as we're going into a more anxious space in our life, right? And trigger those emotions with that scent. Once we've established a scent memory, we can't really rewrite it. It's nearly impossible, but we can create new ones, right? So if every time we work, we burn a specific candle scent, that tells our body it's time to work. But then when work is done, we put that candle out and we put it away, and that scent is removed from the environment, and perhaps we introduce a completely different one. That helps our body and our brain to recognize the difference between work time and my time, right? These little adjustments are just little, and they're very, very small. They add very little extra to our to-do list, if anything, right? Especially if we're just talking about the scents on our bodies and the beads every single day. But they start to create an intention practice that make pretty significant shifts in our overall mental health throughout the day.
Once again, talking to our guest today, Shana Francesca here on I Am Refocused Radio. And when it comes to being the author of your own story, right? You're living your life. You are making these intentional decisions throughout life. Can you share about a concept that you use in your own life to, I guess, keep you in line with your intentions? In other words, like you follow through whatever you're setting your mind to do, and not allowing it to just go, get further, behind.
Yeah, I usually just take a minute, close my eyes, and take a really intentional breath in and out. And I think to myself, when I get to the end of my life, well, I wish I had done more of this, right? Like when I'm establishing intention for a moment, for anything, I'm always kind of weighing it against, how much value, right? Our time is so valuable. How much value does this thing have? And it doesn't mean that watching Netflix doesn't have value, because in that moment, curling up with a blanket and watching Netflix might have very high value because I just need that alone time for myself, right? It's not about like hierarchy as much as it is just checking in with myself and saying, am I going to get to the end of my life and say, I wish I had done more of this thing? Am I going to get to the end of my life and wish I had, spent more time with this person? Well, then I should do the thing, right? As long as I'm mentally capable of doing it, as long as I have the energy, right? So there's so much nuance in that intentionality, but I'm usually going back to, do I wish there was more of this in my life? Does this really have long-term value? Why am I doing this thing, right? Is it aligned with my intention for myself? But to get to that place is usually just to take a deep breath in and out and let myself sit with a decision for just a moment. And if it still feels good, then let's do it. If it doesn't, let's not.
And with that, also part of the topic is choosing joy. So that's something that, you would hope to believe that most people want to pursue. But, face reality, sometimes, days it rains, and it rains a little bit heavier than, the light days. So for you, how do you try to keep yourself choosing joy whenever you have those not so good days?
The thing about joy is just being present, right? Joy is not happiness. They're not the same thing. And I think in my life, I've seen over and over again that joy happens in the moment, when I'm present, when I'm just enjoying whatever, or just being present with whatever is, not trying to change it or make it anything else, just being present with what is and it being enough, right? Because whatever it is, it's there, and I can't change the moment, right? I can change the moments that come after it, but I can't do anything about this exact moment that I'm already experiencing, right? And when I can just be present with that and let it be enough, I mean, that's where intentionality comes in, right? Because if I keep going back to what is the purpose? What do I want to spend my time doing? If I can just keep that in my mind, right? Then as I take actions, I'm going to measure them against that intention, and I'm going to choose the ones that most closely align with that intention. And then I can be present in the moment and know that I made this decision on purpose. It didn't happen to me. I chose it, right? And because I chose it, I could choose differently in the next moment, right? I can just take ownership of all of that. And that's where joy comes for me, is that process of being intentional, doing the best I can to stay present, and then knowing that there's power in my choice.
It's a good point you made about taking ownership, because I think that is a good point to make. Is we are at the end of the day, like they will always say, it's me versus me, it's you versus you in the mirror. You know, you can't put the responsibility on other people to make you, happy. So for you, when you're working with clients and you have a business called Concinnate that people can check out, Concinnate, I think, .world.
Concinnate.world. Yeah, I'm trying to take over the world.
Right. Tying those two together, kind of share about your platform and how you kind of educate people to do what we're just talking about right now.
Yeah, I mean, I love having conversations with people, whether it be from a stage or whether it be in group coaching or whether it be in a workshop or on a podcast. Having these conversations, us connecting as human beings and talking about small ways that we can make these shifts is really important, right? And I actually rebranded and chose the name Concinnate about 2 years ago. Concinnate means to arrange or blend together skillfully as parts or elements put together in a harmonious, precisely appropriate, or elegant manner. And that's exactly what I'm talking about doing, right? And when I think of precisely appropriate, I do not think of perfection, because there's no such thing. If we seek perfection, we will be good at only one thing, and that is absolutely nothing, because perfect isn't a real concept. But there is what's precisely appropriate for us, right? And so that's what Concinnate is all about. That's where I come back to people who subscribe to my website. If you check it out, there's the option to go ahead and opt in to subscribe. If you don't, just hit the escape button. I'm intentional about that too. I want people to know that if they don't want to subscribe, that it's easy to not do so. No forcing here. But we intentionally set up those email blasts at the beginning of the month. I write each and every one of them myself, because we just found them to be much more powerful that way. And I share, practices, I share tips, and I share things with people to help draw them into this discussion around intentionality and to ultimately lead them to a more joyful life for themselves.
We're talking to our guest, Shana Francesca, and man, with today's topic, no mean put you in a hot seat, but one thing that's really a hot topic right now is using, AI. And a lot of people are debating if it's going to be good in the future or if it's just a good tool to use to help as an assistant. We're talking about being authentic. So how can someone kind of keep that balance to where they're not depending too much on other things versus themselves?
Yeah, the thing about ChatGPT is, I do use it, but I don't use it in the way people think, right? So what I do, and the thing about it is you can start to learn how the prompts function. I use ChatGPT to help me gather data to support what I've already written, because I know that there's data out there, but I might say, hey, I need you to grab me 5 sources that talk about this particular topic. I need them to provide this kind of data, so on and so forth. There are sources that you can go and find these prompts and edit them for yourself. But what I love to do is say, hey, ChatGPT, can you edit my writing so that I make sure that it flows properly, that it's connecting with my audience well, so on and so forth. And there's pretty significant, pretty long prompts. So I still write every word of it, but then I ask it to edit it. I ask it to provide some feedback, some suggestions, some additional data to add into there if I want to, depending on what I'm writing, right? So it's a tool, right? I don't know that I want it to, nor would I don't. I know that I don't want it to usurp or to underwrite or to overtake my own creativity, because I still value what's here and it cannot replicate what's inside of my head, right? And so, yeah, it's a tool. We have to think of it that way, right? And not necessarily just give up full control over everything to a tool.
Yeah, I like that, because I'm in the same way. I've been using chat a lot, and one thing I've noticed is if I get too heavily dependent on it, I'll read something and be like, Wait, nah, that's not something I would say personally.
Right.
That doesn't even have my personality. So
Yeah.
you're right, because if you use it as a source to maybe edit or give you some source of information, you can build
Yeah.
off of that, but not 100% rely on it being, a replacement of
Yeah.
Shana.
Yeah. And, have I used it to help me create a LinkedIn post? Yeah, absolutely. But, am I having it write a personal letter that I'm sending out to the people I stay connected with through my email subscriber list? No, I'm still writing that. Right. So I think it just depends on what it is. And oftentimes I might take something I've written and say, hey, can you take this thing I've written, this hour-long speaker talk, right? This keynote speech keynote speech and divide it up or create 5 or 10 or a month's worth of posts quoting from this, right? And yes, it can do those things. So I think it's just a matter of how you use that tool, and it's supporting you rather than overtaking your own voice.
And all that's tying up in today's topic, choosing joy and living your authentic life, because the key word choosing and the other key word is authentic. And what I mean is, for someone to really live a life that people can really connect to, you have to be your real you. And the more you do that, the more authentic you will start to just navigate through life. You won't be predetermined by other things or other circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah. You won't be trying to conform in an effort to be accepted. You'll accept yourself first, and then they'll find the people that accept you too.
Mic drop, man. Okay. Once again, talking to our guest, Shana Francesca. You can learn more information about her on her website, Concinnate.world. And she has like an introduction video that you can check out. And before we let you go, because time just always seems to go by so fast, what's a great call to action for people if they are interested in working with you?
Yeah, definitely send me an email or give me a call. You can reach out via the website. Definitely check out the resources there if you're not sure. But if you're interested, it's always best to just pick up the phone, give me a call, and let's talk about what you'd like to do, what your goals are. Let's dive in that initial conversation, and then see what would be the best fit for you and your goals.
Once again, I want to say thanks to you, Shana,